so we don't hear the background. So starting over, my name is Tammi Davis. I am the Director of Compliance and Policy Engagement for the Gary Sanitary District. For those of you who are not familiar with me or my role, I have the oversight to ensure that local minority female businesses and residents have access to employment and contracting opportunities with the Gary Sanitary District. So through that, I conduct a lot of outreach. I work with a lot of our business partners, such as the one that is presenting today, to ensure that we are providing that access, particularly to our local businesses. So we're very excited that we have Lorri Feldt, who is the Regional Director for the Indiana Small Business Development Center. We are super excited that she has joined us this morning. And at this time, I am going to turn it over to Lorri. Her microphone will be unmuted, and I ask that if you have any questions for her, to please type them in the chat room, and then I will field those questions in the end or when she has a break in particular points of presentation. All right, so let me unmute Lorri. Okay, Lorri, you're good to go.
Thanks so much, Tammi. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate all of you starting your day with us this morning. As Tammi mentioned, I'm with the Small Business Development Center in Northwest Indiana. I know some of you are familiar with us and maybe some of you are not at all familiar. So just briefly, in good times, what our team does is work with people starting businesses as well as those who have businesses to help them start and grow. We help with things like business plan and marketing and all kinds of things. But right now times are quite different. And we experienced kind of a shift in what our team is doing about 3 weeks ago, when conditions changed. And I know you guys are experiencing what so many small businesses are, where your sales have dropped, or maybe you've been required to close because you're considered a non-essential business. So pretty much 90% of what we do right now is help people with this very new and very different environment and economy that we're all dealing with. I know also on the call, we have an array of different kinds of businesses, from very small startups to very established businesses. So my game plan this morning is to go over the basics of some of the SBA programs that you've heard about or perhaps applied for or are considering, and to share with you some other information about resources. Hoping to kind of make sure the material is useful to everyone on the call, even though we're perhaps at very different stages in dealing with this and in exploring some of these programs. Just to clarify, I'm actually not with the Small Business Administration. We are what's considered an SBA resource partner. What that means is the SBA funds part of what we do. We do have a team here serving the 7 counties of Northwest Indiana, and I thought I saw one of our team members on the call. You may be acquainted with Bill Gregory. I think he's waving. As well, we have Cindy Bertram and Gary Brownlee on our team here locally. If you're located outside of Northwest Indiana, rest assured there is a small business development center locally everywhere in the state, and I'm really quite proud to work with a wonderful network here in Indiana. As well, if you happen to be from Illinois or another state, there's an organization like us as in your state as well. Our services are always available at no charge, and we're here to help people with what they're dealing with in good times and in challenging times like we have now. So I'd like to begin by sharing a screen and going through the basics of some of these programs. I see some of you on video, not many. I'm interested for those of you I can see. Have you applied for any of the SBA programs? Maybe wave at me if you have. Aha, okay. That's good for me to know. So hang on a minute. I'm going to share my screen here momentarily with you. Okay, hopefully you are seeing a slide now, and I'm in the corner somewhere on your screen. Tammy, is that good? Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So these
can
SBA,
everyone else see it? Okay, yes.
thank you. So these SBA programs really have been going through a process over the past 3 weeks. You've probably heard information coming as various actions have been taken in Washington. You know, first we had Governor Holcomb here in Indiana declare the state a disaster area that allowed us to access some programs, and then the Congress and President acted on the CARES Act and some other acts that allowed us more programs. But we've been in an environment of change, right? So I actually would highly recommend when you get done with the call today, if you haven't explored the SBA website, I would highly recommend that you go take a look at it, because we're finding they are doing a very good job of updating this website on a very regular basis as things change. So what you're looking at here happens to be a screenshot of sba.gov, sba.gov. And as you can see in the lower left corner, they have a lot of coronavirus resources that you can learn more about. So I would definitely recommend that you, when you have questions, consider this a resource, and you'd be amazed at the amount of information that is available on this site. So the first SBA disaster program I want to review the basics of is one you've probably heard about. It's got this long name, right? It's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL. This was the one that kind of came first online immediately following the state declaring the disaster. And its purpose early on was to be a long-term loan in dealing with economic disaster recovery. And some of you may have applied for this in mid to late March. Others may be considering it now. This is one of the programs that has had some changes over the course of the past 2 to 3 weeks. So one of those changes was due to the CARES Act. If you've heard about something like a cash advance or even a grant for up to $10,000, that was in addition to this Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So in order to have access to that up to $10,000 forgivable advance, you need to apply for EIDL. Eligibility for most of these programs is for small businesses. That means under 500 employees. I really think that virtually everybody on the call is considered a small business or a private nonprofit of some kind. If you have any question about your eligibility, I can refer you to more resources about that. But 98% of businesses are considered small in the eyes of the SBA, according to their standards. So the application process for EIDL has also changed over the past 2 to 3 weeks. So if you had gone in mid-March, maybe the 3rd week of March, it was a long and pretty challenging online application. About March 30th, they really streamlined that online application and made it fairly simple. We think it takes maybe 15 to 20 minutes to apply now on the online form. You'll see in the center of your screen what you need to apply. Basically, in terms of financial data, is pretty brief. You need to know your gross revenues or sales, a term called cost of goods sold, which is something I can define more if it would be helpful to folks, and your operating expenses. So you need 3 pieces of data for a period of 12 months, February 2019 to January 2020. That is the only financial data that the EIDL application now asks for online. Whereas if you applied for it early on, you probably experienced a lot more questions than that. So I feel like they've done a pretty good job of streamlining the process. You see the interest rates there for small businesses, 3.75%, and nonprofit organizations, 2.75%. So this program is offering kind of 2 things. It's offering the cash advance up to $10,000, which is forgivable. And then it's likely to offer small businesses a loan of an initial amount we are now hearing in the $15,000 max range. So you have an opportunity for 2 different ways for cash to potentially flow into your business. Now, obviously, a loan means there is payment back required. These are very favorable loan terms. Typically, a long-term loan, like a 15-year term, with no payments due in the year 2020, like a first payment not due until next year. By the way, by applying to EIDL, you do not commit to taking any kind of a loan out. You have complete flexibility. You get yourself in line by applying. You get potential access to the cash advance up to $10,000, which you do not have to pay back. And then you get to consider whether you would like to take a long-term low-interest loan out as well. So I hope you're hearing that there's flexibility in this process. The application, as mentioned before, is online and it is on the SBA website. So the link is there at the bottom of your screen, but it can also be easily found at sba.gov by clicking through. I'm going to bring up the page to show you what the top portion of the EIDL application page now looks like. Again, if you applied before, let's say in mid to late March, it might have looked different from this. But this is now what the EIDL application page looks like. And of course, it scrolls down from there. Not too painful. You apply directly through the SBA. Very flexible as to what you decide about the loan once you hear from the SBA via email. Now, the biggest concerns we've heard about this one are, hey, is anybody receiving money out of this? Has anybody gotten a response from the SBA? So I need to share with you, as you can imagine, there is a flood of these applications coming in because this virus situation is affecting so many businesses all over the United States. So the process has moved, I would say, relatively slowly, but literally Friday, we did begin hearing that some applicants had received an initial cash advance. If you are one of those, I would love to hear on the back end that you actually have received something, because we are really trying to keep tabs on this. We as a local Northwest Indiana team, and then we get very frequent updates from the entire ISBDC network. So we're trying to listen and hear what progress is happening on all of these loan programs. So as I mentioned, Friday was the first day we heard that a few were beginning to get a response back from the SBA, and some cash advances went out. So that's a little bit about the EIDL, or Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I'm going to move now over to the other program that you've heard probably a lot about lately in the news, right? It's called the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. So this is the program that went into effect when the CARES Act was signed about 10 days ago. So this is the program I feel like it's been on the news the most, and you probably heard references to this, maybe applied for it, maybe you're in process for it. So the purpose of PPP is to provide a direct incentive to small businesses like you to keep your workers on the payroll. Like the name says, paycheck protection, right? So it's heavily focused on your payroll. I want to emphasize that because I've talked with many small businesses who have very few employees, maybe one, or maybe they're just solo entrepreneurs. If that's the case, you're going to need to examine if this is a worthwhile program for you or not. And I'll give you some thoughts on that topic. So eligibility is very similar. Again, eligibility for PPP is to small businesses. That's those who have less than 500 employees. It includes sole proprietorships, independent contractors, self-employed. It includes private nonprofits. And by the way, I don't know if we have any churches represented, but there was just an SBA ruling that came out on Friday indicating that churches are eligible for both the EIDL and PPP. So what can the PPP money be used for? Well, again, the focus is very much on your payroll costs. So payroll first. And then also interest on mortgage, rent, and utilities. However, for the forgivable portion of this loan, at least 75% of the amount received must be used for payroll expenses. So to be clear, the loan forgiveness aspect is in play as long as at least 75% of the amount received is used for payroll. So this, causes small business owners to need to consider, how am I going to maintain my payroll if my employees now are on furlough or not working currently? In order to access these funds, you need to plan to bring those employees back, so that 75% of the amount received is used to pay them.
Lorri?
Yes, ma'am.
While you're on this, there were several questions that came in, so it's probably appropriate to ask this now. Can non-faith-based nonprofits take advantage of this as well?
Yes. Private nonprofits are eligible, like 501c3s, as well 501c19s are eligible, so definitely. And actually I'm aware of several of those who have applied for both PPP and EIDL. Is there another question that we ought to tackle, Tammi?
There are several, but since you were on the part for nonprofits and the PPP, I thought I'd bring that up. But there are several other questions.
Great question.
That we can just let you go through your process. And if it relates to what you're presenting on, then I'll just bring it up at that time.
Perfect. So unlike EIDL, you're applying for PPP through your bank. Hopefully you have an account, a relationship with an area banker who is participating in this program. A word about our banks. The application process for PPP began Friday, April 3rd. So we're a week into this. And very honestly, it's been a very challenging program for banks to jump into. And literally Thursday, April 2nd, during the night, they were still getting guidelines from the SBA on how this all is supposed to work. So I have been keeping in touch with a number of area bankers, and as mentioned, this is a challenging thing for them to have the processes in place and ready to go and receive applications. And each bank is, it's the PPP loan program, but since they are administering it, each bank may have a little bit different process and a little bit different kind of documentation that they are requesting from you. Most banks have now an online process that they are using to receive applications. Some have a little bit different process than that, so it will vary a little bit from bank to bank. Generally, what to prepare are the basic financials you would expect when going for any kind of a loan. But additionally, significant payroll documentation is required for PPP because it's all about maintaining payroll, right? So the application process through banks, we began to hear about a few applicants getting approved during the middle to end of last week. So there are some approvals that have already happened, even though this program is just about 10 days old. Approval through the bank. To my knowledge, at this point, we haven't quite gotten to the point where someone has cash in hand yet. But the process is moving. And I would say, really, this is a huge undertaking. So I have to give some credit to local bankers and to the SBA to have somehow pulled this together relatively well in a short period of time. It is a big undertaking. So a little bit more detail about PPP, and I know a lot of people have questions about this. So let's just talk about a couple of different scenarios. If your business was in business a year ago, February 15th through June 30th, you're looking at a maximum loan somewhere in the area of 2.5 times your average monthly payroll during that time. And I'll explain what payroll costs references in a minute. Seasonally, there is a way to accommodate that. I know in our area, we have a number of seasonal businesses. So you can opt to look at the, for example, summer period if you're a seasonal business, let's say like a landscaping business or something like that, or something that's very tourism oriented. If you're a brand new business, let's say you weren't in business a year ago this time, then the focus will be on availability of a maximum loan equal to 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs January and February of 2020. So you see kind of a laundry list at the bottom. It's about the payroll documentation and the costs that can be covered through PPP, right? So it's not just salaries, wages, commissions. If you do provide wonderful benefits, for example, health insurance, retirement, and so forth, those costs can be included as well. Certainly your state and local taxes on employee compensation can also be included as part of monthly payroll costs. So your IRS Form 940, if you're familiar with that at all, would be documentation of what you're paying monthly for your employees in terms of state and local taxes. In addition to that, self-employed income. subcontractor income. There is a ceiling on that amount of $100,000 per year, but some of you are paying yourselves in that fashion, and those costs can be included in part of average monthly payroll for the PPP loan process. I will say this does get kind of deep into the bookkeeping area, and I'm very hopeful that most or all of you have either a good understanding of your books or a bookkeeper or an accountant or somebody on your staff who can help you with this, because the documentation needed may not be familiar to everyone. So it's a great time to, here we're kind of in a different working environment. This is a great time to get a deeper understanding of your books, to have those conversations with your bookkeeper or accountant or whoever supports you in that way. Or if you do not have that kind of support, I mean, honestly, we've been working with a number of businesses who need help in that area. Feel free to tap into our or other resources, because I definitely think most people will need help in pulling together the type of documentation needed for PPP.
Lorri, that's a great segue into one of the questions. For businesses that do not have those types of documents, this might be a good time to mention SCORE, other resources that if they may be eligible, but they just may not have all the documentation in place to really submit an application right now. Can you just touch upon those resources to help them get there?
Definitely. I would say, a portion of the calls and conferences we're having are just that situation. Our business advisors can be a source of help in that area. Tammi mentioned SCORE, the Volunteer Mentor Organization, may be offering help in that area. And at the end of our program here, I understand also the Legacy Foundation may be offering some help in the form of a small grant to pay for accountant help. So that's a new thing that's coming. I'll share more of that in a moment. But yes, I strongly encourage you, please don't let struggles around your books keep you from applying for these programs. Please seek out the help. You are entitled to these programs if you meet the eligibility, and don't let yourself, with a particular struggle about bookkeeping, end up not accessing this type of loan help, whether it's EIDL or PPP or anything else. So I did also want to mention some help that has become available of another kind. This happens to be workforce development through the state. I don't know if everybody's aware, but under the Federal CARES Act, there is also pandemic unemployment assistance available to self-employed and independent contractors. This is something that's just becoming available nationwide through the State Department of Workforce Developments across the nation, right? So to get more information about this, you would go to the State Unemployment Insurance website, which is listed in front of you, unemployment.in.gov, or the blue screenshot at the bottom is what that pandemic unemployment assistance page looks like. So in other words, independent contractors and self-employed persons can't access normal unemployment, but you can access this special pandemic-related unemployment assistance if you meet the eligibility. There's a lot of information on their webpage. The process to apply is, well, I'll say it, it's not perfect online. Right now, they haven't had time in a week to tweak the website to permit online application by independent contractors and self-employed persons. The current direction is to go ahead and file a claim as you would at that website. You will get denied, but there is a way to add yourself or your sole proprietorship as an employer on that web page. And then the state will be able to identify those self-employed persons and work through the process of providing those unemployment or those special unemployment benefits to you. I know they're working on an online process for this. It's just not ready yet. So that might be another, if this is applicable to you, that might be another website you want to bookmark, because it will be updated and change over the next several days. So I mean, as Tammy mentioned, highly recommend that you seek out small business resources, whether it's us or SCORE, or certainly whoever is in your support network who can help you look at the situation that you have. Each business is different. Each situation is different in our small businesses. Help you assess what's the best course of action. Of course, most of these resources are assisting business owners in a different way. We're not meeting in person. We're reaching out to people via phone or email or a video conference like this. But I gotta say, I've been pretty amazed at how productive these conversations can be, even though they're by phone or video conference or email. Now, I referenced the Legacy Foundation program earlier, and this is so new, I almost felt reluctant to share information about it, but the folks at Legacy said, go ahead. Now, this is specific to Lake County, Indiana only, okay? Because the Legacy Foundation is the community foundation in Lake County, Indiana, but they are working on a program that would make available technical support grants, small technical support monies available to small businesses and nonprofits to provide to an accountant or an attorney if you need help in applying for some of these funding programs. So right now, more to be determined about how to apply for those, but I did want to provide that since I know a lot of our participants are located in Lake County.
Lorri, do you have the contact information or website that you can direct them to for the Legacy Foundation?
You know, off the top of my head here, I'm gonna stop sharing this. I will try to locate that here real quick. Is there a question or two we want to tackle while I work on that?
Sure. One of the questions was for if a nonprofit only has 1099 employees, would they be eligible for any of these resources available?
Okay, so the EIDL program is open to both small businesses and nonprofits and is not focused on maintaining employee payroll. So they're definitely eligible for that. In terms of PPP, as mentioned, the focus is really on employee payroll and maintaining employment. So again, each organization may be different. Perhaps the nonprofit you mentioned has 1 or 2 employees. So that would be payroll, that would represent payroll that would be part of a forgivable loan. Some of the 1099 contractor expense could be part of that loan, but it wouldn't be necessarily the forgivable part. That's our current understanding about that. And a word on the forgivable part, how will that work? You're probably wondering, right? the way that'll work is after the period of time, they're thinking 8 weeks, the bank that you work through to receive a PPP loan would ask for additional payroll documentation to see that you, yes, in fact, brought your employees back or continued their employment and continued paying them. So that documentation would need to be provided for that aspect of the loan to be forgivable. So again, another reason to get a really firm grip on your payroll documentation and overall bookkeeping in order to maximize the chance of getting the most forgivable through PPP. Now, it was asked about the Legacy Foundation website, and I will say that I'm sure this program is not currently on their website because it is new and in development, right? But the website is legacyfdn.org. It's legacy, F as in Frank, D as in dog, N as in Nancy.org.
Okay, another question, are LLCs eligible? I think it doesn't matter whether you're LLC or LLP or a C corporation or S corporation. I don't think that matters.
Correct. Any form of small business entity, and as long as it's a small business, is eligible for both programs. Both will require you to have documentation and know some key information about your entity. When was it established? What is the legal name of your entity? Who are the owners if you have more than one owner? They will want documentation for any owner who owns 20% or more of your organization. So if you have a 3-member LLC and you divided it up evenly, you'll need to provide information about each of the 3 owners. And in particular with PPP, it's going through a bank, you'll need to provide stuff, so be prepared, like driver's license number. Because remember, the bank is using some of their normal bank loan application processes, and that would be part of that. I actually am trying to keep in very close touch with bankers and finding out from them, what do people need? How can they be prepared to apply for these loans? And that is specifically one of the things they've mentioned. Payroll documentation, have documentation about each of your owners. If you have more owners than just you, over 20%. And frankly, they've also been saying, you know, be prepared for the process to be, you know, pack your patience is how I would put it. They are flooded with applications like this. Bankers are working very hard right now. And I really believe they're doing the best they can, but it's difficult. Another thing to factor in, if you're looking to apply for PPP, most of the banks are serving their own account holders first. So if your bank is not participating in PPP, you're going to have a little bit of a challenge in finding a lender who's willing to take on customers outside of their own bank customers. Just like you would take care of your own customers first, and that's what banks are doing, right? So there are a couple of ways on the SBA website where you can find a lender if you need one and your bank or other credit union or whatever is not participating. So there are some ways you can search for that. We can certainly be of help with that as well. Other questions?
Okay. Yes, there are. Let me see. Is there a way to provide a list of banks who are participating in the PPP program?
So you know what, maybe I'll do, I will type this web link in the chat. It's sba.gov/paycheck. This is for the PPP/find. So sba.gov/paycheck protection/find. find, and I'm just putting that into the chat. So if you look over on the right-hand side of your screen, hopefully you can see that.
Mm-hmm. One question that came in, are you aware of any lenders in our region specifically working with farms and food businesses on PPP and the CARES funding?
Farms and food businesses. That's a really good question. I would say, rule one about PPP, go to your bank where you have an account, if that's possible, if your bank is participating, because you're definitely going to get the most rapid and efficient process where you currently bank if they are participating. In terms of food businesses, I mean, really, when I think through the local Northwest Indiana banks that we have, I haven't found one yet that's not participating to some degree in PPP. I think we've all heard about Wells Fargo maybe not participating, and that may be a bank that's active in one of the other areas, but at least in Northwest Indiana, we don't have an active Wells Fargo presence any longer. But I've kept in touch with, I would say, 8 regional banks, and they are all participating in this, as are some of the credit unions. So if you happen to...
I don't think it matters the industry, right? So whether you're in the food business or construction or a nonprofit or technology, because I know there's a lot of different industries that's represented on this call. I think any industry would be able to apply. Let's see, go ahead while I look for more questions. All right, in reference to owner information, what about nonprofits with volunteer boards? Lots of questions about nonprofits.
So what is the question related to that? The nonprofit with volunteer board, is the question, are they eligible or?
So I'm not really sure. So to the person that sent that text, that question, could you clarify it? Reading it verbatim, it says, in reference to owner information. Maybe that person has applied or has a copy of the application. But in reference to what about nonprofits with volunteer board members? And then the second part is, what information would be required?
So certainly they would need the information of, whether it's an executive director or whoever is running that board, receiving payroll, running that organization, receiving payment for that. If it's a volunteer board, I guess I see what the concern is. It's like who to list on the application, perhaps, is the question.
Probably, and I haven't seen the application, but if they are, particularly for a nonprofit, and you have to list your board members,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how they didn't, give specifics, but how it might be set up. This might be one of those follow-up infrastructure type of projects where they may need some additional guidance, maybe on the infrastructure of their organization, how they're set up.
True.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be something where you seek a little bit of support, maybe from the treasurer on the board. Often, I would say most nonprofit organizations who have a volunteer board have a treasurer. That individual could be very useful in helping with this process, because they're probably the person that's manning the bookkeeping aspect, and they have a fiduciary responsibility around that.
Okay, I think we answered the question for financial resources for nonprofits. outside of the PPP, EIDL, through the CARES Act, are there any other financial resources that are available for nonprofits, particularly if they operate off of pure donations?
So there are a couple of different types of bridge type loans out there, and I don't know if that's what the individual is really looking for. Bridge loans are small loans for a short period of time to get you through, some sort of transition. Boy, is this a transition, right? So the SBA has a bridge loan program. Our two micro lenders in the area, those are Axion and Bankable. They both have bridge loans of some sort. I think I've seen the maximum limit on these programs is $25,000. So, it's really designed as a relatively small amount of money to get you through a short period. That's the definition of a bridge loan. I could certainly provide you more information on those if that's what the person is looking for. I hope you saw our contact information as an SBDC team is northwest@isbdc.org. And maybe in the email to northwest@isbdc.org, list that as a question. Need information on bridge loans.
I am typing in that email address here in the chat room, northwest@isbdc.org.
Correct. Thank you.
Next question is, pull it back up. I am a mental health professional, and so what would my COGS be? How would I calculate that?
Great question. Cost of goods sold is what COGS stands for. And for service businesses, I'd certainly include counseling services in the category of service businesses, often have a zero cost of goods sold. So if you are a business, I would say examples might be a law firm, counseling. I'm trying to think what else would apply to that, where there's really no change in your cost when you add a few additional clients or customers, then your cost of goods sold might be zero. With other businesses, let's say they're still services, but maybe a hair salon or a barber shop or a daycare center, usually there's a little bit of cost of goods sold you can identify or is typically identified on your financials. And it might be the products used at a hair or barber shop. In a daycare environment or preschool, it might be the materials like craft materials and food that would vary with additional children coming into the center. My first hope is that each of you has some form of bookkeeping or some help available in terms of a bookkeeper or an accountant. If you don't have that, access some type of advisor or mentor to help you with that. But the EIDL will ask for cost of goods sold, as mentioned before. And each of the bank's applications for PPP, they might not highlight that, but they have all of the other types of documentation that you'd need to provide. So you need to get acquainted with your books as best you can.
As a follow-up related to that, as a business that just opened in December, should I have estimated my gross revenues for 12 months?
So, for example, on the EIDL, well, either application will have a date established. So, when you indicate you established your business in December of 2019, it'll be clear why your gross revenues are for a shorter period. So you can focus in on that, if it's PPP, that January, February timeframe, or on the EIDL, you just show your gross revenues and the two other types of financial data for the period that you have them, for the period that you were actually doing business. And you will have provided the date established, so they will be able to see, oh, it's a newer business. You are still eligible as a newer business. And I know that's a tough break. I really feel for folks who just started a business and, things might have been growing and really getting on board, and now this craziness hits you. It's a tough break. But, these programs are available to assist you as well.
If we know of people who have applied but not heard back, who do they contact at your office to keep you updated?
So, as mentioned, we're not the SBA, so there's not a way for us to check on your application or, help it move more quickly. I wish there was. The SBA does have a couple of ways you can contact them. And the email you can contact them at is disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. Here, maybe I'll put that in the chat as well. My understanding, though, is you can appreciate they're overwhelmed. So probably the most you'll get from that is, whether your application was in fact assisted, that type, received, that type of thing. So disaster customer service at sba.gov is one way to contact the SBA. If you're wondering overall or wanting to share with us, well, here's when I applied, when do you think you should hear something? It looks like maybe with EIDL, it's about 3 weeks. That's a guess. So if you just applied last week, it's no surprise at all if you haven't heard anything. You definitely want to retain that reference number on EIDL that you received. When you submitted your application, it would say submitted and here is your reference number, and it would provide you like a 10-digit number. Any communication you would receive after that on your EIDL application would cite that reference number. That's a way you can know the email you're receiving from the SBA is legitimate. So you on EIDL would be hearing back from the SBA by email, likely by using that reference number, and estimated 3 weeks. I'm hoping it's shorter than that for the advances. As mentioned, some of the advances started to go out on Friday, and I'd like to think the process as it gets going moves a little faster, but we're still watching and trying our best to keep tabs and advising our clients on what we're hearing.
All right, we have a few more questions. I know it's 9:30 and we understand that those may have to log off and, move on to the rest of their day. But Lorri, if we can just go through a couple more questions, particularly since it's being recorded, we could send this out to all the participants. So those who were not able to stay on to get their questions or hear their questions answered, they might be able to chime in later if that's okay. All right, this is a good question, I think. I am the owner of my own company. I have not received payment as an employee. Am I eligible for the EIDL program? I have only paid for 1099 employees.
So if you have no employees, actually, I believe EIDL is really the better program for you, and you are eligible, and it's okay that you don't have employees, just 1099s. I would encourage you to apply for EIDL. Now, just bear in mind, everyone, my biggest concern about these programs is, An initial amount of money, a huge amount, $350 billion, was allocated by Congress for these. I'm worried about that amount getting exhausted. So we're all really hopeful that the folks in Washington, US Congress, are going to allocate more money for these programs. I think that's very likely going to happen just because there's so much demand. But one of the ways to give yourself the best shot is to get your place in line, whether it's either EIDL or PPP. I wouldn't wait. As soon as you're ready, please apply if you have not already. Like anything else, it's a queue that we're all in, and you definitely aren't going to access any of the funds if you don't get in line for them by applying.
And I think that answers the second part of her question about if the company has, this is the person who owns her own company, that if her company has not yet made revenue, which is required on the form, could she still apply? So I think you just.
So no sales at all. Yeah, I always hate to give an answer when I'm not sure. I don't want to give anybody bad information. My gut tells me I'm not sure that that would be eligible, but I would like to check on that. I have not gotten that question before. So I will check on that.
I'll send this person a private chat response so that maybe connect you two together. That'd be fine. She may have more questions. Let's see. Are there any resources for businesses who are not off the ground completely, but they are seasonal?
So that sounds to me like someone who's working on a startup but hasn't started yet. SBDC works with a lot of businesses like that, as does SCORE. So certainly if you're looking for help in how to get started, those resources are available to you at no charge. Or were you saying they're a landscaping business that's established, but they haven't started yet this year? I'm not sure.
That's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if it's an established landscaping business that's been kind of, doesn't do winter work, there's some ways, as mentioned before, we can identify your seasonal monthly payroll. It's all about average monthly payroll, for example, for PPP, and help you apply for that through the bank. EIDL would certainly be an opportunity for you as well. I don't think anybody's asked if you can apply for both programs. You definitely can. I don't know why there seems to be some perspective that you cannot apply for both. You definitely can apply for both. The only restriction is if you say, for example, you're going to use PPP to cover employees plus rent, you can't then also say you're going to use EIDL for rent. In other words, you can't use both programs to pay for the same thing, right? Like double dipping. I hope that's clear. But you definitely can apply for both. And actually, I would recommend, if you're eligible for both, to apply for both. Unless you don't have any employees, PPP is really not suited for that.
Will these loans interfere with you getting other loans, like a home loan? I don't know about that one.
So certainly,
home business? I don't know.
Certainly when you apply for any type of personal loan, they will look at the other debt that you currently have, and they'll look at your credit history. So in that way, this would, receiving a loan through one of these programs would show debt on your personal credit profile and debt to income ratio. Most of these programs are, there's at least a forgivable aspect, or for example, the cash advance. So those are monies that you're not carrying as any kind of long-term debt. So there is protection there. It kind of depends on how much you're borrowing. I mean, if you're borrowing a fairly significant amount through PPP as an example, and some of that's not going to be forgivable, that would definitely count on your overall debt picture as an individual applying for a mortgage.
All right, thank you so much, Lorri, for your patience in getting all these questions answered. Another question, what if you have more than one business? Will a person file for PPP for each company, or how will that work?
Yes. In fact, I just was in an email conversation this morning with one of our clients. He owns 2 businesses. Oddly, they bank at 2 different banks. So he's applied for PPP for one at the one bank and for the other at the other bank. And he actually has an interesting perspective on how the 2 banks' processes are different. I found that to be very interesting, and I'm very curious to see which one goes through faster. So yes, definitely. For each business that's eligible, you can apply for either or both of these programs, whichever is a fit.
I think we answered this question previously. We are a for-profit agriculture research company with no revenues. Will we be able to apply for EIDL?
So that was similar to a previous question about no revenues, and I'm just a little hesitant on that. So I'd like to find a good answer before giving you a green light or a red light on that. So I'd like to find out and then maybe communicate that on the back end. It's not a question I've heard before, but it is a very good question.
All right, let's see if I can fill this one out. For nonprofits with a volunteer board, we kind of addressed this earlier, but it's been elaborated a little bit longer in a different way. For the loan application, who is listed as the owner? The name of the organization or the board officers?
So it a little bit depends on the structure of the board. I assume this is a nonprofit that has a legal entity like a 501c3 as an example. So the organization papers that were used to set that up may have a structure that would help you identify the correct person to list there. I'll freely admit I'm a business girl. I know more about business than I do about nonprofits, but I encourage the individual to look at their organization papers or consult with the head of their board to accurately identify who the right individual is to list on these applications. It may differ from organization to organization.
One question on the EIDL loan, looks like someone may have tried to apply or complete it. It says the EIN does not allow for the correct number of spaces. And there was another question in regards to the SBA. Not sure what the closing documents were going to be. So I don't know if those would be related.
So the EIN question, another word for that is tax ID number. I am a little surprised about that. I have not heard anybody having difficulty entering their EIN. So I wonder if the individual might want to double check to make sure you've got the right number in front of you. Because I think the application, at least from what I've heard from other applicants, I haven't heard of that being a problem so far.
All right, and then they typed in, please disregard the EIN question.
Okay.
Sorry, that was further down the line. I'm trying to make sure we get through as many or all of the questions, actually, which I think we have. The last question seems to be, is there a loan, is there assistance to help people complete the loan application?
So I'm not sure if we're talking there about EIDL or PPP. Certainly, if you need help with EIDL, any of the mentoring sources described, whether it's us or SCORE or your bookkeeper or whatever, we're happy to help. With PPP, you're in consultation with your bank. So the lender will be providing you a specific online application that they are using for a Paycheck Protection Program. If you find that you need help with that, please seek out similar resources mentioned before. But you really want to connect with the bank so you know what that bank is asking for in their PPP application process. Because we have seen it differs somewhat from bank to bank. Certainly it falls in the same buckets, revenues, a lot of payroll documentation is required, like I described before. But if you want to apply for PPP and you haven't connected with a bank, I think that would be a really important next step.
Okay, all right. And then we'll leave so if people want to follow up, if they have more questions, how will they contact your office? Is it through the Northwest, ISBDC.org? I think we typed that in earlier.
Yeah, I would recommend email. Normally our office phones are ringing a lot, and they still are now. I would really prefer you not call the office phone because none of us are there, and we need to, get those voicemails every so often during the day. I personally think email is probably the most efficient way to reach out to us. I guess I would ask for a little bit of patience with us too, because we are flooded with requests and we're doing our very best to try to help as many people every day as possible, each of us, Cindy, Bill, Gary, and I. But northwest@isbdc.org is a good email. Maybe indicate specifically in your email, what you heard or what question you had or what you need help with. And therefore we can, most efficiently assign that and get back to you as quickly as possible.
All right, and the very last clarifying question, he says, clarifying my question. My loan was approved by the bank and accepted by SBA. The lender stated that SBA did not provide guidance on the loan closing documents. They are not sure when SBA will advise.
So that unfortunately does not surprise me. I am certain the SBA is working pretty hard to finalize that aspect of the process because they know that's standing in between them and the business owner getting the funds they need. You are correct. We've only been in this for 9 days now. We haven't seen one go all the way through closing yet. So I am dearly hoping that the SBA finalizes those processes as soon as possible, and we see some of these go all the way through to close and to receiving the funds. Realistically, 9 days is not very long for a loan to go from start to finish. So hopefully they're expediting and confirming a process as quickly as possible.
Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any other questions that have come through. Thank you everyone for sticking in these additional 15 minutes. We are glad that we were able to field through all of your questions. Is there anything else, Lorri, that you wanted to add or share?
I would just offer our support and encouragement. I know it's a really challenging time. Please seek out support wherever you can find it. I sure would hate the idea that a small business owner is struggling and, you know, huddled in their home and not reaching out to sources of help that are available. So just please be aware that we and many other resources are here to help you. The main thing everybody wants is for each of you to be able to get through this crazy period in as good a condition as possible and move forward from there. This will be over at some point. So just want to offer our support and encouragement, and please hang in there.
All right, I'm just typing in Northwest at isbdc.org for everyone again. All right, well, thank you everyone. Have one question about the slide presentations. Will the slide presentation be made available for participants?
Sure, how about I send that to you, Tammi, and then do you have a way to distribute it?
I think so. I think Zoom allows me to extract the registrants in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I could just kind of do a reply all and attach it.
Great.
Okay.
By the way, I love Zoom. I hope all of you do too.
I'm beginning to love it myself. All right, everyone, take care. Have a wonderful, blessed day. And as Lorri said, hang in there. Bye, everyone. Bye, Lorri.